everybody. Welcome back to the Consummate Athlete Podcast. I'm Molly Herford, author of several books on cycling, with the Shred Girl series launching in just a few months now, which is very exciting.
And I'm Peter Glassford. I'm a registered kinesiologist and an endurance coach.
So, what have we been up to this week? I've been pedaling a lot.
Yeah, Molly's been co-coaching, I guess, here at the national team camp for Canada for cycling. Specifically, we have mountain bikers on the road, but Molly has been riding while I have been watching from the van and carrying water and other things, which I actually don't mind. I like to watch people perform their sport, and yeah.
I feel like I've got the better job this week, but yeah, I've been really enjoying it. I haven't been riding a ton. As a lot of you know, I've been focusing more on the running, but as anyone who's been listening knows, I have that knee issue that's been kind of ongoing for the last couple months, so we figured we were going to give it a hard reset with a couple weeks kind of focusing on cycling for endurance. So it's actually been pretty cool building endurance this way, and it feels better than trying to do runs and getting frustrated. So for any injured runners out there, or injured people, finding a different sport to, build your base with still actually works pretty well.
Well, I mean, I think the fact that you've been able to get through the volume and stuff is maybe a testament to some of the consummate athlete concepts we've been using. So, I mean, the fact that you have been running is a big base of your fitness that you do carry, and you have strength training with that and all the walking we do. And I don't know what else you do. You do a bit of swimming on top of that. So I think, especially for people who aren't, going to world championships necessarily. I think you're doing a good job with that.
Thanks, honey. Anyway, since
I think I basically just told you weren't going to world championships.
Yeah, geez. Sick burn out of nowhere. Anyway, so today we're actually talking to a woman who I've been following on Instagram for, it feels like forever. She's got a crazy cool account. She's a pro cyclist as well as being a registered dietitian. So Lori Nedescu, most of you would know her as The Cadence Kitchen, although she recently changed the name of her business to Hungry for Results. She's awesome, and it was really fun getting to talk to someone else who, I'm obviously not a pro road cyclist, but we do have pretty similar, I guess, athletic backgrounds. We both run a bit, or run a fair bit, actually. We both really like focusing on sport, but we also have jobs outside of it that are still related to the sport industry. So it was really fun kind of talking about how she balances her training and her, working with different clients, and, a bunch of how she handles some of the big nutrition questions that athletes often have.
Yeah, and I mean, there's questions always, right? And I think because nutrition evolves sort of with the athlete, and the young athletes are growing and learning the basics, I guess, of nutrition and making those mistakes. But then as we get older, I think we just get more confused, and bodies change and activity levels change. It's
pretty funny. I mean, as you write about nutrition, which I do for a lot of different places, you start realizing that even like the highest level expert have different opinions from each other. So, it's very hard to figure out what exactly you should be doing when, one person you consider incredibly intelligent is saying one thing, and then someone else you also consider incredibly intelligent is saying another thing. So, I mean, a lot of it comes down to personalization. I think that's kind of been the buzzword for the last few years in nutrition, is this idea of figuring out what actually works for you specifically.
Mm-hmm.
So we talk a bunch about that. I had done an article for Outside magazine on diet resolutions that you should skip and sort of how to recalibrate them. So some of the more cliched diet resolutions, like I'm going to lose that 5 pounds, or I'm going to go keto as soon as January 1st hits. We were actually in Trader Joe's checking out the other day on December 31st, and a man and a woman are standing in line ahead of us, and the woman looked at the man and says, you're going to have to eat this entire cake tonight because you can't have it starting tomorrow. And it was probably the funniest thing I'd heard, because I kind of forgot that that's actually how a lot of people really see that new year.
You see it like the when you're going to start things, right? It's definitely
#diet starts tomorrow.
Well, or anything, right? Like I'll get emails from clients. This year seemed like there's a lot of people around New Year's, which in the past I've not had as much, but I guess that's good and bad. But yeah, a lot of, okay, this is what I want to do. And then, you suggest sort of a gradual ease into that. But then it's like, okay, I'll start that on, a week from now. And it's like, well, why not do some of it now? Like, why not start, right?
Yeah, exactly. Maybe don't eat the entire cake today with the idea of not eating the cake tomorrow.
Well, and that's perhaps part of the dieting and the resolution issue, right? I don't think it's bad. I don't think anything's necessarily bad, but it starts on this day and ends on this day type thing versus trying to find some sort of workable solution for the long term.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. No different than, I guess you could compare it to like pacing a race, right? Like you can go out at your sprint pace or 100%, but if it's a longer event, like we hope life is, there's maybe a more sustainable pace there at some point.
Yeah, exactly. So Lori and I talked through actually a bunch of those resolutions. So you're going to hear part of that in this interview. We talk a bunch about other stuff, but we get into those resolutions, and we'll also link to the article if you want to see her take on it, plus a few other experts that I talked to. But I thought she had some really, really good points. I was really excited to get a chance to chat with her about those.
Yeah, and it sounds like she's got some good experiences, both personally as far as, actually having a job, but then also performing at a fairly high level herself. But then also having the degrees and then also the work experience, right? She's not just working in a lab. She's also working with real people, right?
Yeah,
who also
exactly.
have jobs and families and stuff. So it's always
Exactly.
interesting. I always find that's the trouble. That's always my lament with a lot of people is finding that person, right, who has that professional experience, but also, sort of the education to back it up.
Yes, and Lori also does a bit of the van life stuff as well. And I mean, I'd say actually about the level we do, where you would never say we live in the van, but she spends a lot of her time traveling out of it for races and stuff. So she and I also swap some tips on what to put in your food box for the optimal cooking situation. We laughed about the fact that both of us have contemplated the JetBoil little mini propane stove, and she actually has it but has never used it, and I've almost bought it probably half a dozen times, if not a dozen times, only to realize we wouldn't actually use it. So a lot of good little tips for that if you're someone who does a lot of traveling for racing or work or anything. So with that said, let's get into it. Enjoy this podcast with Lori. So yeah, let's kind of dive right in. First of all, how do you pronounce your last name?
Nedescu.
Okay, that's what I thought. Always worth checking.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going to get started here. When someone comes up to you and asks, what do you do? What do you give them for your bio? Because I feel like you have so many different facets.
I do, and it's really difficult. I don't think I would nail down like a proper one thing, catch-all bio. It kind of depends on who's asking and what it's about. Because there is like the athlete in me, the cyclist, the marathon runner, the dietitian, the sports dietitian, the writer, the Instagrammer, so there's so many different things, and I just try to work them all together. Mm-hmm. But definitely I am a sports dietitian and a wellness dietitian, and everything else kind of stems around that and builds on that.
Mm-hmm. Now, before we dive into your educational background and stuff, I was wondering, could you explain what the difference between, dietitian and nutritionist is? Because I feel like this is a common thing that people completely miss.
Yeah, definitely. And it's hard because there's so many terms for things nowadays, and you can call yourself anything. I was listening to a podcast and somebody was like, I'm director of awesome at some company. And that was like their legit title, right? Which is awesome, but at the same time, it's just like really sets in that you can call yourself whatever you want. But in the real terms, dietitian, or if someone says dietitian, nutritionist, it's somebody who has gone through at least a bachelor's degree, who has gone through an accredited internship program that could last 6 months to a year, and that has passed a national accredited exam that gives you these credentials. So it's really a commitment. This is like a full-time, all-in accredited knowledge base on nutrition. And of course, there are different specialties around that. Mm-hmm. And then a nutritionist, depending on, again, who that person is, it could be like a holistic certification. It could be a trainer at the gym who got, anywhere usually between a 3-week and a 6-month like online certification, or somebody that took courses in health that they like. So really a lot less science-based, a lot less well-rounded, and really less educated and regulated for that terminology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because I've been through, some of the programs that someone would take and could conceivably call themselves a nutritionist. And I'm like, I am nowhere near qualified enough to ever tell someone that I'm a nutritionist.
Oh, yes. I'm so glad that you say that. And it's true. It just does not give you that like knowledge base. And the same thing, like I had my certification as a personal trainer. I would not tell people that I was, an athletic coach. Mm-hmm. Like, no way did that prepare me to like go in and just give myself that title. Like, yeah, I got a credential. I took an online course, but that's all. So, I mean, with a dietitian, you're really getting somebody who's invested their complete career into nutrition and that knowledge base.
Yeah, and I want to touch on your educational background before we get into your sports background. So have you always wanted to be a dietitian? Were you always like fascinated by nutrition?
Yeah, I was one of those weird high school girls that was like, oh, I'm going to have the organic salad today. And, I was just always had that foodie sense, and Wild Oats Market was like big at that time. So there was a lot of that health trend coming up. I lived in the West. So I just really gravitated towards food and enjoying the foodie aspect of nutrition. And that just kind of took me through when you're deciding at that age, what to do in college. Mm-hmm. It's like, something that's more like health and wellness, and I like food, so nutrition. And it ended up being a good fit for me.
Mm-hmm. So when did the sports side of that kind of come in? Were you always interested in sports, or did sports nutrition come after you clicked onto sports later in life? When did the two start overlapping?
Yeah. So I think initially, back in that high school sense where you're starting to get an idea of what you want to do with the rest of your life, I was an athlete. I was a tennis player. I did track. So there was that athleticism, but it kind of ended as this is what you do to spend time in high school, Mm-hmm. So in college, I was a gym rat. Admittedly, I worked out to burn calories, and it was a hobby of going to the gym. I was always active, but not in a sense of being athletic, not in the performance sense. And they're very different things. It wasn't until after my undergrad when I moved to Florida and it was sunny all the time. I was like, I can't just sit in the gym. Like, I have to change my lifestyle a little bit. And I started running and started cycling. And that's when I kind of bloomed as an athlete. So I was a later in life athlete, and just starting my career as a dietitian. And then that kind of rolled as the years went on into understanding more about how I could be a better athlete with my nutrition knowledge.
Okay. And so when did you start the Cadence Kitchen website?
I started it, I want to say 2 maybe 3 even years ago as, that hobby, that side project, mm-hmm. Just have a presence and an outlet, and then really just started putting a little bit more and more time into it and investing a little bit more energy into it. And things just started to take off a little bit more with that. And now it's my full-time avenue.
That's awesome. Okay, so you were just like gym rat in high school, or gym rat in college, sorry. And then now you're an elite cyclist. Normally gym rats don't become cyclists. What got you on the bike?
Yeah. Well, I was big on the treadmill, and I ran my first half marathon and marathon. I did an ultra run. So the gym rat kind of led me into running at first. I actually trained for my first half marathon exclusively on a treadmill. Because at this point, I was like, people don't go outside and work out. Like, no. stuff, sweaty and gross, you know. So yeah, I know, it's like a whole different world. So I was still a gym rat, and then running took me outside into the real world and trail running and ultra marathons. And then I had a stress fracture. And I think that was a pivotal point of connecting the nutrition with being an athlete and figuring out that, these two things are not mutually exclusive. Like, they work together. And I was put into a boot and couldn't run for months, but you could ride your bike. So, of course, I was spinning, I got a trainer, and like that just led into knowing that I wasn't going to kill my body anymore with full-time running, but I loved being on the bike. So
you lucked out there that you actually enjoyed being on the bike as a recovery tool instead of, you know, most runners would be like, oh God, this is the worst thing in the entire world.
It was not easy. It was not an easy transition. Anyone who knows me during those, or knew me during those few months, was like, I was a terrible person, I'm sure, because it was hard. It was a really hard transition, and something that I have to come to terms with. But I am still, I think I still love running. You know, it's that runner's high. I don't get that as much from cycling. But cycling is a whole different game, and it's taught me so much, and I love being on the bike. So I'm really happy to have found that avenue.
Yeah, so what made you choose the road? If you were running a lot of trails and ultras, I would have, you know, kind of assumed, mountain biking, of course. But you obviously found, you know, your passion and your talent on the road.
Yeah, I think it goes back to like that initial gym rat thing. I don't have that adrenaline rush with it. I like it to be very straightforward. So even my running, I really enjoyed finding ultras that were on paved paths or road marathons. And, you know, even now, I would much rather just go out on pavement and run than go find a trail. I enjoy the road. And the same with cycling. It's less technical in some aspects. I think you can really just get into it and focus on the performance and the power numbers, and it's a little bit more straightforward than going out and worrying about running into a tree or just falling into some mud. So, and I've done some cross, and the whole muddy aspect of it is not my thing. I don't love it. I really like the road, and I like the endurance aspect of the road, that you can just kind of go forever.
Yeah. And to kind of go back, when you were talking about the stress fracture, you said that was sort of what made you start realizing nutrition played a part. Were you doing something before that wasn't helping with your nutrition? And if so, like, what did you change? What did you find from that?
Yeah, I was definitely focused on eating what I thought was healthfully at the time, and had a mostly plant-based, and I was a pescatarian, so included a lot of fish at that time. But I was definitely over-restricting, and I was in that marathoner's trap, or, you know, like in many elite sports, where you start to lose weight and you start to perform better and you feel lighter, and so many athletes fall into that cycle. And I was definitely one of them. And my stress fracture, I'm sure, was due to the fact that I was not nourishing my body correctly. And I was just breaking down my cells and my bones to where it couldn't support me anymore. So that was like a big wake-up call. And going through those months of not being able to work out so much and gaining a little bit of weight, and really focusing on, you know, giving my body what it needed. And I was able to come back, and actually my next marathon out of the boot with about 10 pounds of extra body weight on me, and I had a PR. And it was just this like huge wake up of, oh, I can do this, and I can do it better if I'm really paying attention and giving my body what it needs and not restricting. And then that really was the point where I started to get more into performance and eating for performance and how to connect those dots.
Yeah, it's such a huge challenge. I was helping coach a cross-country high school team this season, and, you know, what the, you know, teenage girls think of as, you know, proper sports nutrition and stuff was frightening, to be honest. It's like, oh my God. And then I'm remembering, oh, wait, I was thinking that same stuff, 5 yeyears ago, and I'm in my 30s. So yeah, it's so easy to fall into those.
And it's a story that it's so common that it's kind of scary, right? So it's good to be able to have a platform, and not that I always take the route of talking about, restriction and body image, because there's so much more to sports nutrition than just that, but helping to put the emphasis on eating balanced foods and what nutrients can really help is so important to get out there.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're not just like a road racer, like you casually jump into the occasional race. You actually race for a team. So how did you land on your current team?
Yeah, I've gone through, and road cycling, it's a difficult beast. There are so many women that want to race, and not enough teams at the elite level to really have as many people in the races. So I went through for years of guest riding, and it's kind of like you call up a team and say, hey, can I ride for you? And it's this like application process, and it's an awesome opportunity, but it definitely gets tiring after a while. You're just kind of floating around and bouncing from team to team, and being this like athletic nomad in the cycling world. So a few of us, women who are kind of in that same position of like bouncing around, got together and formed a new team for the upcoming season. So we're taking it, and we're able to have a level of women for the domestic elite level of competition, and riding in the professional road tour, and really just being able to perform, at that level as a woman, I think is really awesome. And it's going to be really fun to see what a new team can do. And it's exciting to have another team like added to the teams that are already out there, and seeing the growth of the women in the sport.
That's awesome. Also like scary and super courageous to, dive into that whole thing. I've managed teams. I've, ridden for smaller teams, and I know what goes into trying to manage and put together a whole season, and more power to you for that.
Yeah, thanks. It is really exciting. It is a ton of work. So kind of back to that bio, like adding, team director to my list, which is a little terrifying to have that role, but also really exciting. And I know that the other women on the team we have such a good, strong team of people they're all professionals. So I think that's one thing to note about women's cycling that's really cool, is most of the women they're professional. The cycling is a full-time, but also a part-time gig. So you have to love it. You have to love doing it. And all the women on our team have their full-time professional gigs and are willing to do above and beyond to put this team together and have a full season. So it's going to be awesome.
That's fantastic. Yeah, it's so funny. I do a little commentary show on, cyclocross domestically and internationally for Flow Bikes right now. And every week I end up talking inevitably about, here's this woman who's, come up in the rankings, and like, oh, by the way, she's a full-time biologist in her, spare time.
Yeah, it's crazy. And it's so different, like not to put the men down, but a lot of the men in this sport, well, it's just a big difference that I don't think a lot of the general public realizes is a lot of the men come up in their early 20s, late teens, and go right into the professional ranks. And with the women, it's definitely a later in life sport where most of the women have like careers and have like professional degrees. We have people on our U.S. team that have, degrees from MIT. These are brilliant, motivated people. And I think it talks a lot to the sport where you have to be physically strong, but you have to be mentally strong too.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't matter, I think, like what level of team you're on. I think there's maybe 20 women in the US right now that are racing as their full time. That's all they do career, and even most of them have some kind of side hustle type thing that they do.
Right, exactly.
That's awesome. Okay, so how do you balance doing that on the road with then also you've been doing a lot of run training lately? Is that just like an off season you run, or how do you balance the two?
Yeah, I run during the off season, so that was one kind of commitment I have to make when deciding which sport to go with and to be a cyclist and to identify, as a cyclist and have that be my main performance goal was I can't, only like top triathletes can balance that, and I cannot perform really well running a marathon and also handle like a 5-day stage race. I'm just that cool. So I had to pick, and knowing that cycling there's so much energy into it. I'm traveling a lot. You're racing for days, and then you pack up and go, to a different state and you race for days again. It's it just takes so much work to do that running during the season is a few miles here and there, So the off season, once the late summer or early fall comes, I'm so happy to get off the bike for a little bit and to start running and plug in and do a marathon to keep up general fitness and just get back to that kind of runner's high. So eventually someday I will go back and really set my performance goals on trying to see what the best marathon time I can run is. But for now, I'm definitely fully focused on riding my bike.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I've definitely tried to do both at the same time, and it never ends well somehow. Go figure.
Yeah, it's really hard. They take so many different muscles and different strategies and energy levels that doing them both just kind of weigh on each other in a negative aspect, I've found. So, and transitioning is really hard too. So those first 2 weeks where I'm like not riding as much and starting to run, oh my gosh, it feels like death. Mm-hmm. I'm like, how is this fun? Why do I want to do this? I'm like barely jogging. Everything hurts. But a couple of weeks later, and I love it again. So, yeah,
I'm in that moment now, just from like a knee thing. I've been off of running for a couple weeks, and every time I go out now for a 5K or something, I'm like, oh, running's so hard.
It is. It really is hard.
Okay, so what does your ideal, and I know this is ideal is in quotation marks here, ideal day of eating and training look like for you right now? Just because I'm so fascinated by this with someone who's professional in both sides, both the nutrition side and the athlete side.
Yeah, that's a really fun question. If I could design my ideal day, every day is kind of it's like a puzzle, right? Mm-hmm. So that's how I approach it. And my strategy is, what is my workout like? What do I have to do if it's a double, or, yesterday it was a 3-hour block. Today it was an hour and a half, and then it'll be an hour later. So every day is a little bit different. So I start with when the training is going to come. And that usually comes after I plug in meetings for the day and what work has to be done and deadlines. And then I go into blocking off the training time. And then I put in what foods I can eat around that and what makes the most sense to fuel my body for that specific workout and day's schedule.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Okay, what's favorite breakfast? What's your go-to right now?
Oh gosh. So my favorite, I wouldn't even say it's favorite, but something that I eat before. So if I'm going to do a hard workout and I need something beforehand, I've been really just hitting simple gluten-free Czech cereal with a banana and milk, and that digests really quickly for me. So it's easy, and it doesn't take a ton of time to make. So I know it's not glamorous, but it gets the job done. And then if I'm not training or I'm training later in the day, I can't go wrong with a soft yolk egg on some avocado toast. And I eat gluten-free. So it's a gluten-free bread or English muffin. But yeah, so those are my probably 2 different breakfasts. And I usually have a latte. I'm a big caffeine person. Black coffee
Yes.
or a latte with as many powders as I could fit into my latte. I definitely, yeah. Definitely one of those people who have like the drawer of powders and adaptogens. And yeah, I go all out.
Okay, what are a couple of your favorite adaptogens right now? I'm always so curious about this.
I think it's really good to switch it up. So I kind of rotate through, and the mushrooms are really important. So reishi and cordyceps, those are 2 of my go-tos. And then black maca powder, I really enjoy, and that has such a naturally sweet flavor. And then spirulina, charcoal are 2 others that I use. Those are kind of my most common rotation.
Nice.
And I think there's substances that, like, in small amounts, you're just trying to boost the body's ability to naturally combat stress and toxins without doing anything too harsh, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just a little bit of powder that you're probably not getting from normal foods that you can add. So it's just a little supplementation that you can do.
Mm-hmm. And I didn't ask you this before when you mentioned it. You were pescatarian before. Are you still pescatarian now, or have you shifted out of that?
I shifted out. So during that time, I was diagnosed with celiac disease. So during that time, I was trying to up my iron levels, and that turned me on to eating meat again. And I think it's very important to have a diet that's well balanced, and that does include animal products, whether it's meat, fish, dairy, in the highest qualities that you are able to consume. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to eat meat and animal products, make sure that they're grass-fed, pasture-raised, wild. Go get the best that you're able to get. That does really make a difference. But yeah, mostly plants, definitely heavy on the plants, but not exclusive to anything outside of being gluten-free.
Yeah. I had almost the same kind of trajectory, minus the gluten part. But yeah, I was vegan for my first several years, I'd say, of training and endurance stuff. And, I was a junk food vegan, like, let's be honest, but a lot of bad side effects from that. And I think you can maybe do it, but it's just so much harder.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the perfect point is I definitely believe that you can do any diet style that you want if you're so careful. And most athletes and most busy people don't have the time, the resources to put into being that careful. And you're just putting yourself at risk for so many more problems of vitamin deficiencies and injury and immunity issues that it's not worth it. Like, just include a little bit here and there. It doesn't have to be like an all-out thing, but a little bit of balance goes a long way for your health.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the subject of balance, I actually jotted this down as we were talking. You're balancing 2 very, very full-time careers, right? Like dietitian, where you're doing these consults, you have a book coming out, you've got the website, you have all of this stuff going on that professional side, but then you're also a professional athlete. How do you balance the training demands with the work demands?
A lot of coffee. Quite honestly. Yes. I am massive caffeination. No, but really, it's using time and being very efficient. And I think that's one thing that I have. That's just part of my personality. I like to get as much out of every moment as I can. So a lot of multitasking, a lot of scheduling and seeing when I can get the most out of my minutes. And I'm lucky that these things kind of go together. So even when I'm riding or training and going to races, all of these experiences tie into what people eat or what you should eat and how I'm going to write the next post or what I'm going to contribute for the next article or project, and how I can better counsel my clients and coach my clients on how to eat too, because I am around more athletes. I see what they're eating. I get questions from them. And, sometimes I know the answer, and sometimes it makes me think and go find the answer, and opens me up to new realms. So I'm lucky that they play off of each other, that I'm more invested in my nutrition career because I want to, you know, for a little selfish reasons, I want to perform better myself. So how can I do that? And I'm always kind of experimenting with myself. And then when I'm on the road and I'm performing, you know, what do I see happening around me? Do I see someone who's never reaching for the bottle, who's not eating before, who, you know, and the questions that I get when I'm out there from the other athletes, and kind of tie those things together. And just making sure that there's time set aside for work. You know, you can't let one aspect outweigh the other. So that there does have to be a balance where even on days where I'm tired, or maybe I'm driving like across the country to get to a race or something, and I'm stopped in a parking lot for the night, and it's like getting out the laptop and putting on the hotspot and like, okay, we've got to get this done, or we have to pull over for a phone call. So it's just really being on top of it and being motivated. And I think most athletes are, so.
Yeah, definitely. I'm so glad you said that about the driving across the country, because I feel like we do pretty similar, and, you know, it always looks very glamorous on the social media and on the website and everything. And then I'm like, yeah, except that I was at this truck stop, like taking a call with like my laptop in one hand and, you know, recording this and doing this. And yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot of managing, and like, it's fun to think it's glamorous, but like, there's a lot of times where, oh, it's so hard. And like, I drive a van that I sleep in and utilize the van life for a few months of the year when I'm out, you know, racing a lot and just have to be on the road a lot. So there are moments where it's like, okay, I just made my coffee in a truck stop on the ground and like just got out of bed, and there's like motors going all night, and I'm by a freeway, and this isn't like, I'm not overlooking some gorgeous canyon and stretching my legs. Like, I'm tired, I'm miserable, you know. So
Yup.
I'm like loading my bike into right next to my bed in the rain. You know, there's so much that goes into it, but it's fun. Like, in the end, it is a fun experience.
Totally. Okay, since you have the van life thing going and we just talked about it, van life kitchen, because obviously, you know, you're into the nutrition. What are some of like your staples for in the van, both cooking and then your food staples that you always bring with you?
Yeah, great question.
I
so
love
eating
this.
on the go is something that I feel like I have almost perfected over the last year. And I mean, I have a cooler. So it's a cooler that plugs in. So you kind of have to assess, you know, what the kitchen is, what you can possibly accommodate. So a cooler and a few drawers where you can keep pantry staples. I have a sink, which is nice, a mini cutting board and a knife. So it's kind of just playing with that, like, what can you actually put together? And if I can, you know, stop in somewhere and get some fresh items, then it's like a big salad, a lot of canned wild tuna. That's a go-to. So a good quality canned tuna, cartons of milk. So whether it's plant-based or cow's milk, I kind of switch between the two, but there's the shelf-stable versions of those. So you're like utilizing packaged foods in the healthiest way that I can really comes into play a lot. So a lot of granola bars, a lot of bananas, and then making sure that those stops into food, into, you know, fresh stores are utilized. And I'm just like cramming vegetables in my face sometimes by that point, because I'm like so in need of it. But there are opportunities. Like, some of it is, there are times where I'm like parked somewhere nice, I'm at a campsite or a park, and I can really like get out the cooking gear and make something fun. There's a lot of times where it's, you know, you're just constantly like driving, riding, working, and there's no time to really set up. So it's sandwiches, it's canned tuna and crackers, you know, it's a shake, a protein shake. So just kind of utilizing, making sure that you stock yourself with the go-to packaged items that are like the best quality that you can find, and that you'll feel good about utilizing more than you would naturally normally want to. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Do you do like a camp stove or anything like that?
Yeah, I always have that equipment with me. So camp stove, a jet boil. Um, so I am prepared. I have like a saute pan, so I can do that. Just the amount of times that I've actually been able to utilize those is not that much. So
I know,
there
I
have
know.
been times, like I was at a race in Vermont and the weekend was just gorgeous, and I was out there and there's like all this fresh Vermont farmers market produce and fresh bacon, maple syrup, and I was making these huge spreads. But outside of that weekend, it's been very hit and miss to be able to actually like get out that equipment, because then you have to think about when are you gonna, where can I clean that equipment? What can I actually? So it becomes very challenging, and a lot of times it's easier to just utilize quicker options.
Yes, definitely. It's funny. We keep coming back and forth between buying the jet boil or not, because that's for that exact reason. We're like, okay, how frequently are we actually, like, are you going to pull it out at a truck stop in the middle of nowhere? Maybe?
I have for coffee. I definitely have. And it's useful because it's so fast, but also there are so many cool gadgets now that you can utilize for like travel. So I have a cup that plugs into like your car adapter, and it boils water like in the mug.
What?
Yeah, which is such a game changer, because when I get up, I want coffee, and sometimes when I'm on the road, I'll utilize those like mushroom coffee packages. So being able to like start boiling water as I go and then just like mix coffee into it, it's amazing.
Okay, you might have just like changed my life. What brand is it? You're going to have to find the brand and send it to me.
Yeah, I'm going to look it up, because it's like Amazon is brilliant for getting me all the little gadgets that I need. I have a travel rice cooker, like a travel individual waffle maker, also brilliant.
Oh my God.
There's a lot of little equipment that I take on the road with me. It's a traveling kitchen for sure.
Okay, that cup thing just changed my life, because normally I bring just like a kettle that I have to plug in. So I'll like go into a truck stop, and like in the washroom, they usually have an outlet somewhere. So I'm like the weird one, like boiling water.
I have definitely, before I found this cup, I had to pop up like collapsible kettle, and I remember one time like bringing it into Whole Foods Cafe and like boiling my own water at the cafe table. Like it's insane the things that we do, and people are like, what is happening? And you're like, don't worry, it's just my normal breakfast, it's fine. I'm traveling.
Oh, that's so good. Okay, so you said something before about experimenting on yourself, and it's awesome to have yourself as a guinea pig, and I definitely do the same. I have to ask, were there any just absolutely failed experiments that you've done, nutrition-wise?
Oh, gosh. It's a fun thing to do, and I don't like to recommend something or, prescribe something if I haven't tried it for myself, and I like to be able to get that personal opinion of like, okay, I know all this is happening, but what does it actually mean? What does it actually look like? And one thing that I was doing recently, and I usually use the off season to do this, because during the season is not the time to experiment. So off season becomes like, let's play with our diet time. And recently I was doing the time restricted eating. So really trying to eat during a specific time window. And that was really fun. And I think that was one that I could really, get behind and promote. And it takes a little bit of power and restraint. But when you look at that one compared to some other diets, it's definitely an easier one to implement. And that kind of plays into fasting workouts. So that's another one that, as I start doing it myself, I have to ask, okay, am I doing this just because I'm doing it and it's a fad? Like, what's the actual science behind it? And that goes into like reading a lot more articles and finding a lot of studies and learning the science behind it. And then kind of looking at the science compared to my experiment of one and saying, all right, is this worth it? Is this something that I would suggest, and how can I, if it is, how can I implement, or like, how can I suggest this to somebody else, knowing the struggle that I went through to do it? You know, how can I get you to do it? And I think that's a big part of it, is being able to relate and have that personal knowledge. So the time restricted eating and the fasting workouts, there's a lot to that. I've put some new posts up about it, and I'm definitely into it so far. So that's a big positive for that one. One of the negatives was I tried a big elimination diet, and some of it was just like nightshades, and it's good to try it out. I'm going to say I think elimination diets can show you a lot about the foods you're eating, but some of the things like getting rid of tomatoes and eggplants for me was just seemed like a couple of weeks of a waste of time. So I think you can definitely go too far into it where it's just like, okay, this is probably silly and doesn't need to happen.
Yeah. Was that the low FODMAPs one?
Yeah.
Yeah, that one's brutal. Oh my gosh. The amount that you can't eat.
It is. And that's like the point of it is to kind of pick out certain groups and not do the whole thing all at once. So it was definitely part of an elimination diet where I was like looking at, okay, I'm doing 3 weeks of no caffeine, no nightshade, like no, all the things that I thought might have bothered my digestion, got rid of them, and then added some in, and there were some that I was getting rid of just because they were on that popular list of, okay, let's check these out, and others that I authentically was like, this could really be bothering me. So I think that's one point when you're experimenting with your own diet, is really ask yourself, like, okay, do I really believe this is a problem that I have, or am I doing it just to do it? Because at a point you don't want to just give yourself dietary grief just because it's popular.
Yeah, which actually, that lends super well into talking about a couple of these kind of more ridiculous, I guess, resolutions that people tend to make around food in the new year, especially us athletes who, are kind of looking for sort of the next thing, I guess.
Any excuse to make the next goal and to perform well. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So the one that I thought was, kind of one of the big ones that I know a ton of people make is like, okay, January 1st, I'm going to go paleo, go keto, go, no carb, go, full crazy elimination, anti-everything diet. So
yeah, I mean, poor January. It's like
I
the
know.
month of deprivation. And I get it to a degree because, yeah, if you've enjoyed the holidays extensively, your body naturally just wants a break, and being a little leaner and cleaner is fine. But like you're alluding to with those big blanket goals, it's not realistic. You're not going to stick with it. So unless you're giving yourself a 30-day window, which I think anything can be somewhat helpful within a short time period. It can be fun to kind of reboot and recharge the system. But if you're saying like, oh, I'm going to do this all year, really, and why? Kind of ask yourself why, and what are you hoping to get out of it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think the biggest one lately has been like any of these super low carb ones, whether we're talking about paleo or keto or anything like that. So when someone says, okay, I'm going to, January 1st, keto for life, what is maybe like an easier way to ease into this? Like, let's maybe drop the carbs a little bit. Like, what would you suggest for that?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. The word keto just like really so frustrating.
It's like nails on a blackboard, really.
Right. Oh my gosh. I hate it. I'm not a fan of the keto thing. But if someone's like really into it and really wants to try it out, why are you trying it? Like, what are you hoping to get out of this? If it's weight loss, like, okay, there are strategies that we can like work into for that. If it's performance, like, there's no clear science that points to performance benefits. So kind of just working out and going from that why you want to do it, or do you really just want to eat a lot of fat? Do you really just honestly love consuming caffeine, right? Because that's what it is. And I think a big part of it is realizing like what this diet entails, because it's not just eating like, fat bombs that look pretty on Instagram. It is a real commitment to if you want a snack, you consume a teaspoon of olive oil. Like, does that sound like the snack you want to be having? If you answer 100% yes, then okay, you might be able to handle this diet.
But I also might think you're a serial killer, but
yeah, it's going to be a challenge, and it's going to be very difficult. And there's a lot that comes along with it, as far as, as just reading into how high fat diet can harm your sleep habits. And like, there's so much more to it. So really, when you're making these blanket resolutions, ask yourself why you're doing it. Like, what's the real thing you're hoping to get out of it?
Yeah, we always say, like, whenever someone says, okay, I'm gonna go, keto or paleo or whatever, like, could you just maybe like cut out like one processed food that you were eating in a day? Because it's very rarely someone who's eating a like beautiful whole foods, diet that's full of vegetables and they're perfectly hydrated and all of that. But like, could you just, I don't know, eat a vegetable? Like, just start with the vegetable.
Yeah, and starting is like the best advice, for anything. It's like, you wouldn't just the first day you got on a bike go race, an 80-mile race. Like, it doesn't happen. So look at your diet right now and kind of assess, use a tracking tool, really reflect on where your current status is, and then making that big jump is not realistic. So paring down, where you currently are and looking for those few big holes that you could fill with something healthier, that's really what you want to be focused on. And that's going to have such a better, like, long-term lasting benefit for you than just taking on some huge diet that's going to include a huge grocery bill, revamping your kitchen, being miserable. Like, it's a whole lifestyle change. So definitely starting small and kind of like working your way through from where you are to your current goal. And that's what any resolution should really tackle.
Yeah, I remember, this is like super lame, but I have the worst sweet tooth in the universe. And my biggest, like, proudest thing was when I was able to like shift my eating chocolate at night to first like eating a little less chocolate at night with a bunch of strawberries, and then eventually shifting to like just strawberries. That was like the biggest win of my entire life.
And it's so true. And it's like, you have to kind of like step yourself down and realize, like, okay, the world didn't end when I did this. But if you were to just go cold turkey, like, you get those cravings and it backfires.
Yeah.
So it definitely is important just to like wean yourself off something, and recognize like those small, like, little victories as they come. Like, oh, I ate half the bag of chocolate tonight. Awesome. Go me. Yeah. Perfect. And then like, oh, I ate a quarter with some berries. Like, great. I'm so cool, because that really matters. And that's going to be a sustainable long-term approach. And that's what we're all really after, right? It's something that we can do forever and feel really good about it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So the other, totally common resolution, and I was joking about this on the last podcast we did, was for the past like 15 years, and not in the past 2, but say from like age, I'm going to say 12 till the age of like 28 or so, my New Year's resolution was to lose 5 to 10 pounds. Now, I never actually weighed myself. Could not really tell you what my like starting weight was. Just knew that 5 pounds, that needs to come off.
Yeah, and it's not never ending like 5 to 10 pounds. It's always going to be there, right? No. You could always lose another 5 pounds. It doesn't matter where we are right now. It's like 5 pounds, that'll make my whole year be amazing.
Exactly. Exactly. My life is going to change.
Right, and maybe, but again, like, so you noted that you didn't weigh yourself first. So that 5 pounds really, it's not a factual thing. It's just that idea of losing weight that is your goal. And you can't have a good goal if it's not pinpointed and if you're not reflecting on your current status. Mm-hmm. So if you're not saying, like, this is where I am right now, my diet over the last year has been pretty poor, I've eaten a lot of junk food, I'm definitely at a heavier weight, less desirable body composition that I want to be, because I just got tested and I just stepped on the scale and it wasn't pretty. And like, you need to be able to know that and know where you are currently to make any kind of change.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're just like jumping blindly, anything you do, you can't really say like, oh, it was this or it was that or this matters, because you might have been doing that all along.
Yeah.
You really have to know, like, you really have to reflect on where you are right now and then the point that you need to be, and kind of just working on bridging that gap.
Yes, exactly. Also, like, I mean, no one ever, it's never 5 pounds. Like, that's the most arbitrary number, but I would say that's probably the thing everyone will say that they want to lose, right? It's never like, I want to lose like 7.3 pounds.
Right, exactly. And it just kind of simplifies it in our mind, and I think to the point, like, oversimplifies it, of like, oh, it's this blanket goal. And I was just writing a little post about this, like, earlier today about, I don't know if you've seen, like, on Instagram, because I swear half of my life is on Instagram. So the whole, like, monthly intentions became really big this year, and everyone, like, drawing in their journal, their pretty journal, their perfect handwriting and colorful pens, about what their intentions were for the month. And I was like looking back through all of these posts and like trolling through the hashtags, and I was like, these don't mean anything. You know, they're just like, be more mindful. Number 2, spend less money. Like, okay, like, these are the definition of New Year's resolutions, and people are making them like monthly. There's no goal attached. There's no like action statement attached. And that's what really makes a goal be able to be achieved, is you have to lay out a plan. So maybe your goal is to lose 5 pounds. Maybe you really want to lose that 5 or 10 pounds. That's really important to you. For a lot of athletes coming off the off season, that's a very real goal. And making sure you can't just say like, I want to lose 5 pounds. Like, what is that 5? What is that number after you lose 5 pounds? Why do you want to get there? And how are you going to get there? So is it going to be, you know, not eating snacks in the evening? Is it going to be having a smaller portion of whatever during the day? You know, be very honest with yourself about how you're going to get there. Because the goal is meaningless if you don't have a plan in place to reach it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other 2 myths that I kind of thought are, you know, poor resolutions that I thought of actually are those like month of January ones. And I waffle on these. Because on one hand, you know, yeah, it can be a really good reset. But on the other hand, the one time I tried to do dry January, it led to a very wet February.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So true. And I personally, like, I can't handle even the thought of doing a dry January.
No, it's very upsetting.
Let's face it, it's a miserable month.
Yeah.
It is cold. For people like us who live in the tundra, where it is bitter cold and you stay inside all day, like, that glass of wine in the evening is like, it's happy, right? I don't want to give that up in January. Like, that will make me a miserable person. So, like, okay, maybe the holiday season was rough. Maybe you were drinking a lot during the off season. Start cutting it back. You know, when it gets to the race season, that's going to be dry. It's going to be dry March through June for sure. You know, it's January maybe isn't the best time to dive all in. You know, you don't want to have it backfire. And that's a big part of like these big blanket goals and these kind of diving all in statements, is they most likely will backfire. And that backfire is usually worse than your starting out point.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Like you were saying, the very wet February, like if you're going to go dry for January, make sure that you have a plan to like ease yourself out of it and not just like go all out once the short-term resolution is over. And I think it's just, you know, I much rather prefer when people do something that's more sustainable or has a more long-term reason and aspect to it, something that you can really take away. So instead of being dry, you know, just limit it a little bit. Don't say no sugar. Don't say no alcohol. Just say, I'm going to have 3 drinks a week. You know, what does that look like to you? Or depending, and it all depends on what you currently do. If you currently have 2 drinks a night, well, then maybe take it down to 1 drink a night. And then towards the end of January, your goal is like 3 drinks a week. You know, that's going to be a much better sustainable practice of working your way down and getting used to a smaller amount than going cold turkey. And then, as soon as that day is up, you're going all out and
Yeah, exactly.
going to have a really terrible hangover. So not a good look.
Yeah. I also noticed with my dry January, that really meant the chocolate consumption at night went way, way up. When there's no glass of wine, you're like, well, there's extra calories that I can totally have in chocolate form.
Right, exactly. And it's that trade-off. So, yeah, it's so common that we make these goals without really thinking about how we're going to take them on and how they're going to create balance in our lives and like what they could completely derail, and is it worth it? So,
Yeah.
And I'm really, I think New Year's resolutions are awesome. I think we should all make them, but make them in a way that it's going to benefit your overall, like, long-term health and performance and nutrition. So definitely has to have that long-term aspect.
Yeah. And then the last one I thought of is the one that I've definitely been guilty of, just like the laundry list of resolutions where you're like, I'm going to do CrossFit 10 times a week and I'm going to podium at CrossFit Regionals. I'm going to lose 20 pounds. I'm going to do a marathon. I'm going to start fasting for 1 day a week. Yeah, and the list goes on.
Right, because we kind of like tend to dump everything that went wrong in the last year into January 1.
Yes.
And wait, like we must tackle all of these things. And really it's like pick your big goal. Maybe it's getting at the podium at nationals. How are you going to get there? And that involves a lot of different aspects. So you have like these micro goals that get you to your big resolution. Maybe it is lowering cholesterol levels or whatever. And how is that? It's not just what you eat. It's how you live your life. It's maybe smoking, drinking, sleep habits, different physical activity. So you kind of have to have that big goal and then just break it down. But if find yourself just dumping all of these random goals that you feel like achieving, what do they add up to in the end? Are you trying to be a happier person? Are you trying to be more fit? Are you trying to be better educated? What is that ultimate goal? And then start chipping away at like how you can accomplish that. And like, what are those little micro goals?
Oh, such a good answer. I love that. Okay, so I think that wraps up all of our New Year's resolution things. But before we wrap this up, talk to me about your new book. That's super exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting. It's like one of those projects that I've always wanted to do this, and I'm still kind of in shock that I have one like sitting in front of me, and it's this printed thing. Like it's not just an ebook. It's not on my website. Like this is actually published. My name's on it as an author. It's still like setting in as like, oh wow, this is kind of cool. And like so much work went into this, and a lot of it was actually written during intelligentsia. Oh my gosh, it was such a stressful time, and I love my teammates so much because it was like breakfast, before races and having to be, at these crisps all day, every day for like 10 or 11 days straight, right?
Yeah.
And like traveling to them and, everywhere in Chicago takes you like an hour and a half to get each way. So it was like this big chunk of the day, and then I'm like, oh, I have a deadline to get like 3 chapters done this week, sent to the publisher, and it was just such a crazy time. But such a fun project, and I'm so happy that it's completed. And yeah, so it's a 30-day, which kind of speaks into some of our resolution talk, like cookbook and meal plan. And the reason that it's like 30-day is because sometimes those micro goals are really helpful to stick with for a certain time. It's like way easier to commit and say like, okay, I'm going to eat, more whole foods and plant-based for 30 days instead of doing it forever. Because forever is hard to take on. And forever isn't something that I think we have to take on with all things. So this is a great way to kind of just like revitalize, reboot the system, and have a plethora. I think there's 100 recipes in here, original recipes that you can pull from to have that healthier month and to see how you feel, by eliminating the foods that probably weren't making you feel so great.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, it comes out on Christmas, right?
Yeah, so it's up for pre-order now on Amazon, and the ship date is on Christmas, so just in time to help you out with those resolutions.
Perfect.
Get a little bit of clean eating in. And it's all the recipes are naturally gluten-free because I have to try cooking them, so
fair enough.
I couldn't eat the gluten, so they're all gluten-free, and they are plant-based. And the reason for that is because I'm not an exclusive plant-based eater, but I feel like that's the easy part, right? We all know how to add a scoop of yogurt to something. We all know how to grill a chicken breast and cut it and put it on a salad.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that part of it isn't the part that most of us struggle with. The part that we struggle with is getting that foundation, that healthy plant-based diet, so that when we're saying, like, oh, I'm plant-based eater, it's not a junk food plant-based eater, because it's so easy to, like, fall into that convenient trap. So
yes.
Learning how to play with your vegetables, make your own dressings, it's something you can commit to for a short period of time that you're gonna have lasting benefits. So you're going to see how your body feels eating this way, and then make up your mind to stick with it or to incorporate just bits and pieces as you go on and start your like more normal eating process.
Awesome. Yeah. All right. Where can everyone find that? Where can everyone find you? All the handles and websites and everything.
Right. So there's a link to the book at thecadencekitchen.com. So that's the main website, lots of recipes and blogs and nutrition services on there. And then you can follow at Instagram at Cadence Kitchen.
Thanks so much for tuning into the Consummate Athlete podcast. You can check out my stuff over at theoutdooredit.com or by following me on Instagram and Twitter at Molly J. Herford. And you can check out Peter's coaching, training plans, blogs, all that fun stuff over at smartathlete.ca or by following him on Twitter and Instagram at Peter Glassford. And if you want to support this show and other awesome podcasts, please check out wideanglepodium.com for show info, other podcasts, bonus content, and to become a donating member so you can get all of that rad behind the scenes content and help keep shows like this on the air. And lastly, if you're enjoying this podcast and all the information that we're bringing to you every single week, do us a solid and pop into iTunes to leave us a rating and review. It takes you about 2 seconds. You can do it on your computer, you can do it on your phone, and it really helps us out. Thanks so much, and we will see you next week.